Okay, so what if I told you that there's a treasure out there worth billions that is just waiting to be found? A treasure belonging to a lost kingdom that would save millions of people from poverty. Hidden gold that would make the Philippines the wealthiest nation on earth. This is not just about vast wealth hidden away. It is a treasure so elusive and captivating that it blurs the lines between fact and fiction, between fantasy and reality. But beyond the glittering allure of this treasure lies a deeper question. Why are we so drawn to these stories? And what hidden treasures can we really find buried deep in the islands we now call the Philippines? Today we'll break down the facts, the myth, and the controversies surrounding the enigmatic Tallano gold. We'll be comparing hoax and history about the kingdom of Maharlika. Mabuhay, or in Kapampangan, luwid kayo. Welcome to my channel. It's me, Kirby Aráullo, your friendly Pinoy historian. And if you are new to my channel, I make videos about our people's history, culture, and everything in between. So if you like learning about the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and beyond, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on any of my upcoming videos. Now without further ado, let's set sail to the heart of today's epic saga. Let's unveil the truth about the kingdom of Maharlika and the enigmatic Tallano gold. Long before the arrival of the Spaniards, the diverse indigenous societies of our ancestors in what we now call the Philippines were indeed very rich in gold, a fact supported by numerous golden artifacts housed in various museums and private collections today, both in the Philippines and abroad. Now for decades, the supposed Tallano gold has been controversial and divisive. And thus, unraveling the truth requires us to engage in thorough research, meticulous analysis, comprehensive investigation, and solid evidence. It's not enough to simply rely on TikTok or the fleeting snippets of information online. So after this video, make sure to check out my list of credible resources and recommended readings below to deepen your understanding about today's topic. Because honestly, in this day and age, it is very important for us, it is crucial for us to know the truth and not forget about our own histories, regardless of our religion or political affiliations. Now, according to the various versions of these stories about the Tallano gold, long before the Spaniards arrived in the Philippines, they claimed that our archipelago was part of a vast, wealthy, and mighty kingdom called Maharlika. And this vast kingdom supposedly included not just the Philippines, but also territories like Sabah, the islands of Hawaii, Guam, the Spratlys, and many others, with supposed tributaries that included Da Nang in Vietnam, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the Kuril Islands, stretching from Southeast Asia across the Pacific. And according to these stories, this vast kingdom was ruled by a single royal family, none other than the Tagean Tallanos. They also claimed that Raja Sulaiman of Maynila and Datu Lapu-Lapu of Mactan were supposedly the children of King Luisong Tagean Tallano, who reigned over the kingdom of Maharlika from the 9th to the 15th centuries, a great king ruling the kingdom for 600 years. Now, despite the Spanish colonization of the Philippines, according to their stories, the Tagean Tallano family allegedly continued to wield influence, that they were even among the signatories to the 1898 Treaty of Paris, when the Philippines officially became a colony of the United States. And then according to their stories, in the 1930s, Pope Pius XII allegedly borrowed 640,000 metric tons of gold from the Tagean Tallano family. They claimed that this gold was loaned to the Vatican through the efforts and mediation of the Catholic priest Father Jose Antonio Diaz and the skilled young lawyer Ferdinand Marcos. Now, according to the same story, after World War II, they claimed that the Vatican returned this Tallano gold to the Tagean Tallano family, and for his crucial role in these transactions, Ferdinand Marcos Sr. was allegedly paid with gold worth 192,000 metric tons, or about 30% of the total Tallano gold. And this allegedly made Marcos the richest man in the world. Now, many actually use this 30% of the Tallano gold to explain the wealth of the Marcos family. They believe that this is the same gold that the Marcoses deposited in the Swiss banks, while the remaining 70% of the enigmatic Tallano gold was supposedly deposited by the Tallano family in the Central Bank of the Philippines. But is this story even true? Is it truly a hidden chapter of history, or is it simply an elaborate hoax? Okay, first and foremost, there has never been a kingdom called Maharlika in any written history, nor in any indigenous oral traditions we inherited from our ancestors. The territories of the Philippines, Hawaii, Sabah, Guam, and the Spratlys were never under a single royal family. In fact, the Philippine archipelago itself was never a single kingdom, nor a single territory before the Spaniards arrived. Instead, it was composed of various kingdoms, sultanates, and indigenous societies with their own distinct cultures, religions, languages, and social systems. An example of these included the powerful Sultanate of Sulu, the Kingdom of Luzon, the Sultanate of Maguindanao, the kingdoms of Butuan, Cebu, Caboloan, and the mountainous regions ruled by the indigenous Ifugao, Aita, Lumad, and many more. So yes, there were numerous ancient societies in the history of what is now the Philippines, but the Kingdom of Maharlika is purely fictional, and it was never the ancient name of the Philippines. So if you're curious to learn more about the ancient kingdoms of the Philippines, check out my other videos and the books I've written about our history and culture. But wait, does this mean that the word Maharlika is entirely made up? No, not exactly, and here's why. Okay, the term Maharlika is very real. It's not fake, it's not made up. But in the languages of our ancestors, the term Maharlika was never meant to denote a place or imply royalty or nobility. Instead, the real meaning and the true significance of Maharlika refers to a social class, specifically people who were once enslaved but were granted freedom. But unlike the Timawa, who enjoyed complete freedom, the Maharlika still had obligations or duties to serve for their datu. In other words, contrary to what many may have come to believe, the true meaning of Maharlika does not denote a higher status. In fact, during the time of our ancestors, the Maharlikas can be considered a lower class compared to the Timawa, because the Timawa were entirely free, while the Maharlika were former slaves who had been granted freedom but with strings attached. And thus, it is also incorrect to refer to the Datu, Raja, Lakan, and Sultan as part of the Maharlika, because they were never part of the Maharlika. They were part of the esteemed Maginoo class in Tagalog, Maginu and Mapyang Sugi in Kapampangan, or Tumao in the Visayas. So where did Maharlika actually come from? The term Maharlika in Tagalog or Mardika in Kapampangan originated from the ancient Sanskrit word Mahardika. And this term found its way into the many languages of Southeast Asia, where it took on meanings related to freedom and liberation. And this included Mardika in Kapampangan, Mahardika in Bahasa Sug, Maradeka in Bugis, Mahardika in Javanese, Maradika for the Maranaos, and many more. In fact, it also included the Dutch term Mardijker, and all of this reflecting variations of freedom. Indeed, in Bahasa Melayu and Bahasa Indonesia, Merdeka translates to freedom, underscoring the common theme across our diverse but interwoven cultures. Therefore, the word Maharlika fundamentally represents the transition from slavery to freedom, highlighting the complexities of social hierarchy among our ancestors, rather than implying any inherent royal blood or noble status. In simple words, the term Maharlika in Tagalog never meant royalty or nobility, and it was never the name of a kingdom. Okay, so if the kingdom of Maharlika is not real, then who exactly is the great king Luisong Tallano? The supposed king Luisong Tallano, allegedly the ancestor of both Lapu-Lapu and Raja Sulaiman, cannot be found in any historical records, nor in any legitimate oral traditions. He was not the father of Lapu-Lapu and Raja Sulaiman. In fact, Lapu-Lapu and Raja Sulaiman were not even related. Okay, so if we look into the genealogies of my own ancestors, like Raja Sulaiman of Maynila for instance, his father was the brother of both Lakandula of Tondo and Raja Matanda, who was recorded as the king of Luzon when the Spaniards returned in the 1560s. They were the sons of Raja Salalila of Luzon and Dayang Ismeria of Brunei and Sulu. So on their father's side, they were the grandchildren of one of the most legendary queens of Southeast Asia, Kalangitan of Luzon, and her husband Raja Lontok. Now on their mother's side, they were also the grandchildren of one of the most powerful kings in the history of Southeast Asia, Sultan Bolkiah of Brunei, and his beloved wife, Putri Leila Menchanay of Sulu, who was also said to be the favorite granddaughter of Sultan Shariful Hashim, the founder of the Sultanate of Sulu. While on the other hand, Datu Lapu-Lapu of Mactan in the Visayas was actually already very old when they defeated Magellan in the Battle of Mactan in 1521. And thus, if you look at it, the true contemporary of Lapu-Lapu in 1521 was not Raja Sulaiman of Maynila, who was born decades later, but his great-grandfather, Sultan Bolkiah of Brunei. And this is not a mystery. In fact, this can also be seen in the writings of Pigafetta during the historic Magellan expedition. And actually, apart from both Lapu-Lapu and Sultan Bolkiah, the writings of Pigafetta also documented Raja Matanda as the young prince of Luzon that the Spaniards encountered and abducted in 1521. Now, unknown to many, including many Filipinos today, the genealogies of the royal families of Sulu, Brunei, and even Luzon are meticulously documented. In fact, throughout the colonial period, the Spaniards also recorded the direct descendants of these ancient Lakans, Rajas, and Sultans. And in these extensively documented genealogies of pre-colonial royal families in the Philippines and across Southeast Asia, there has never been a recorded king named Luisong Tallano. In short, the Tagean-Tallano family never owned the Philippines, let alone Sabah or any other islands from the Spratlys to the Pacific Ocean. Okay, so if you're telling me that the Tagean-Tallano family were not really the royal family of the Philippines, then why exactly were they included in the 1898 Treaty of Paris? What were they doing in Paris? Okay, so another common claim is that the Tallano family were among the signatories of the historic Treaty of Paris in 1898, where Spain sold the Philippines to the United States for $20 million. Now, it's true that the Treaty of Paris took place in 1898 and that the United States bought the Philippines for $20 million. But not a single Filipino signed this document. In fact, not a single Filipino was even allowed to participate in these negotiations. Not even Felipe Agoncillo, who was sent to Paris to represent the First Philippine Republic. In fact, Agoncillo himself was ignored by both the Americans and the Spaniards. In short, no Tallano nor any Filipino was involved in the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1898. Furthermore, the $20 million the United States used to buy the Philippines from the Spaniards was sourced from the American taxpayers and not a single dime from the Tallano family. Wait lang, didn't the Vatican borrow gold from the Tallano family? And wasn't Ferdinand Marcos Sr. their lawyer back then? According to their story, Pope Pius XII supposedly negotiated to borrow gold from the Tallano family in 1934, and this gold was said to be transported from Kota Kinabalu in Sabah to Europe in 1939. However, there is no historical evidence to prove that the Vatican actually borrowed gold from the Tallano family, and if this were true, there would have been records or reports about it long ago. In fact, the Philippines and the Vatican had no diplomatic relations in the 1930s. It was not until June 4, 1951 that the Philippines established an embassy in the Vatican City. And claims about Father Jose Antonio Diaz acting as a mediator in this transaction is also unfounded. In fact, the pictures or images often attributed as Father Jose Antonio Diaz is actually a picture of Father Gregorio Aglipay, the revolutionary priest who founded the Iglesia Filipina Independiente. And if this loan was true, if Father Jose Antonio Diaz indeed helped the Vatican borrow, gold from the Tallano family, then why isn't there a single record in the history of the Philippines? Why isn't there a single record in the extensive Vatican archives? Now, if you think about it, if Ferdinand Marcos Sr. really received tons of gold from this Tallano loan, then he would have been, known as the world's wealthiest man in the 1950s. However, records from that era point to Jean Paul Getty, an American, as the world's richest man, not Marcos. And if Marcos truly had 192,000 metric tons of Tallano gold deposited in Switzerland, then why is it that Switzerland only have a recorded gold reserve of only 1,040 metric tons? Taking into account the history and the science of gold mining, the figure of 640,000 metric tons of gold surpasses the bounds of reality. To this day, only about 187,000 metric tons of gold have been extracted worldwide. And the remaining gold reserves or gold underground that has not yet been mined is only about 57,000 metric tons. It is therefore astonishing that the gold supposedly owned by the Tallano family is way more than 3 times the total amount of gold in the entire planet. And here's another thing. They claim that when this gold was returned to the Philippines, it was deposited in the new Central Bank or Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. And supposedly, there was an agreement between the central bank and the Tallanos to convert them into the national gold reserves. Yet, there is absolutely no evidence of such a transaction. Transferring this massive quantity of gold would require stringent security, diplomatic protocols, and financial measures. The absence of any trace, any documentation, or even a whisper in the media raises questions. So if this were true, then why isn't there any mention in the newspapers or on the radio? Why isn't there any single trace, not a single piece of legitimate document proving this? But okay, let's say that, this was done secretly. If the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas actually received this amount of gold from the Tallano family, then the Republic of the Philippines would have been one of the world's wealthiest nations. And if this were true, then the Philippines would not struggle with debt or need international loans. The Philippines should not be drowning in massive debt today. And if they really had that much gold, then why haven't they used this gold to pay off the debt of the Philippines since the 70s? Because the sad reality is that the Philippines has been drowning in debt for decades to this very day. Sadly, as of June 2023, it was recorded that the outstanding national debt of the Philippines had reached 14.62 trillion pesos or $264.49 billion. It was also recorded that in 1984 alone, during the height of the administration of former President Ferdinand Marcos Sr., he borrowed $24 billion in the name of the Republic of the Philippines, a debt equivalent to around $73 billion in 2024 that the people of the Philippines are still paying to this day. Now, according to various research and comprehensive investigations by experts, in the Philippines and around the world, from the 1960s to the 1980s, the Marcos family have amassed somewhere between approximately $10 billion to $30 billion squandered from the national treasury of the Republic of the Philippines, aka from the Filipino people. And this estimate of $10 to $30 billion in the 1980s is actually equivalent to $39.8 and $119.6 billion in 2024, or about 2.23 trillion pesos to 6.7 trillion pesos in 2024. But wait, why would the Marcoses need to steal if they had received gold from the Tallano family? As mentioned earlier, many believe that the wealth of the Marcoses came from the fabled Tallano gold. Yet, a closer look reveals a different story. By carefully analyzing the evidence, it is undeniable that the wealth of the Marcoses was extracted at the expense of the Filipino people and not from any lost ancient treasure. And most of the stolen assets were deposited by the Marcoses in Switzerland using aliases like William Saunders and Jane Ryan to hide their true identities. And that is why in the year 1990, the Federal Supreme Court of Switzerland ruled that the Marcoses must return their stolen wealth to the government of the Philippines. Okay, so how exactly did this story even spread? And why is it that so many people still believe in the Tallano gold? It's actually hard to pinpoint exactly where, this tale started. But if we examine the origin of this story and how it spread over the years, it is undeniable that it has been used to cover up corruption and to deceive voters. For example, during the recent elections, it is sad that many people were actually made to believe that they would receive Tallano gold bars in exchange for their votes. And actually, despite the Marcos family's denial of their involvement in the Tallano gold, it is undeniable that the spread of this misinformation originated from at least their supporters. But to be honest, we can't really blame the people who were swayed to believe in this enigmatic Tallano gold, because the real problem is rooted in the long-standing crisis of education and this general lack of knowledge about the history of our own people. There has been a crisis in education in the Philippines for a very long time, and this is not the fault of the everyday person. But sadly, the corrupt and the greedy exploit this lack of historical knowledge for their own personal gain. Sadly, the spreading of such misinformation and disinformation, this twisting of historical truth to fit their own agenda, not only obscures the vibrant and deep history of our islands, but also deepens the obscurity shrouding the true legacy of our ancestors. Our people's history was once dimmed by centuries of colonial miseducation. Now, it fades further into oblivion, obscured by the weaving of false narratives like the enigmatic Tallano gold. So if the kingdom of Maharlika is entirely fabricated, if it's fake news and entirely a hoax, then what is the truth about the pre-colonial and ancient history of the Philippines? I mean, didn't they find so much golden artifacts across the islands? Are you telling me that these golden artifacts are fake? No, not exactly, and here's why. Unknown to many, the pre-colonial islands we now call the Philippines was indeed naturally very rich in gold, but it was not owned by a single clan alone. In fact, gold was widespread across the different social classes, from the slaves to the nobility. Even the remains of many of our ancestors were actually adorned with gold. Unknown to many, including Filipinos today, our islands and our ancestors excelled in goldsmithing, a meticulous craft that connected our people with the broader gold-working traditions of Southeast Asia. But although these ancient societies had extensive ties across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, not a single family ever controlled all of these lands. While it is also true that parts of our history remain unrecorded or forgotten, the tales of the Tallano gold and the so-called Maharlika kingdom do not hold up. These tales are notably absent from both historical records and the indigenous oral traditions across Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. In fact, these fabricated tales and conspiracy theories only emerged fairly recently. Now, it is also worth noting that the Philippines is actually blessed with numerous scholars dedicated to researching and uplifting our people's history, shining a light on narratives long overshadowed and eclipsed by colonial perspectives and miseducation. To be honest, there's still a lot of work needed to be done to truly uplift the stories of our ancestors. There's still a lot of forgotten chapters in our people's history that are still buried underneath centuries of colonialism and miseducation. But we must not invent stories nor deceive people, especially if it is intended to cover up corruption and to spread lies. Let us not distort history and deny the truth. We owe it to ourselves to draw lessons from those who came before us. And as I've mentioned, many times before, knowing about our roots does not simply mean a blind, nostalgic longing for the glitz and the glamour of the past, while ignoring the conditions of the present. Embracing our history means being awakened and immersed with the realities of today, armed and empowered with the wisdom of our ancestors. This is the essence and the true purpose of history, a beacon guiding us to a brighter future and empowering us with the knowledge to forge a better tomorrow for our motherland and our people. And that is it for me today, so let me know what you think about today's topic in the comments below. And let me know in the comments below if you have any suggestions for future videos in this channel. And if you want to support me and my channel and my research, so more people can learn more about our people's history, culture, and everything in between, please consider joining our growing community by becoming my patron on Patreon or a member of my YouTube channel. And don't forget to check out my books, coloring books, ebooks, and merch about the fascinating history and the colorful traditions and cultures of the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and the diaspora. Maraming salamat po. Or in Kapampangan, dakal pong salamat kay Hongan. In Magindanawan, syukran na benal. And in Bahasa Sug, magsukol tuod kay mo. See you next time. Or in Tagalog kita kits in Kapampangan, Mikitix, and in Bahasa Sug, balik kisab.